And now we have something even more fabulous. Bruce Duff of the street Walkin Cheetahs on the phone live.
Yeah, Bruce Duff is a writer, a producer, a singer, and a manager. He's like a perennial rock and roll guy. Let's welcome Bruce Duff to the Church of Rock. Hey, brother, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Super cool.
Good. Cold, but good.
Yeah, you're down in L.A. where it's not cold, right?
Well, we've had our severe California winter for the past month or so, but yeah, it's California cold. I feel like I don't really deserve to complain about it because it's what everyone else is waiting to warm up to.
Yes, that makes sense. Before we go any further, I must do my top of the hour legal ID. You're listening to KSKQ 89.5 FM Ashland, Oregon, and KSKQ Translator, K231CW, 94.1 FM Medford, Oregon. So now that that's out of the way, yeah, thanks for making time to talk with us, Bruce. I found out just recently that you have this really cool rock and roll book out, and I'm like, I think I'm going to read that book and then reschedule another talk because the book
would be great. It's been out a few years, and I definitely made the rounds with it, but it's always good to let more people know about it, and maybe they'll be interested and go check it out. Sure.
Yeah, and I was looking through some information last night and just happened to find that. And I was like, I'll have to read that and then have you back on because just based on some of the reviews, I'm going to want to talk to you after reading it.
Okay, I'd be thrilled to do it, of course.
And if you're listening, of course, Bruce Duff has a great book. It's a tour diary called The Smell of Death, Warts and All, correct?
Well, warts and all is not part of the title, but yeah, it's called The Smell of Death.
Okay.
Put out by the fantastic people at Rare Bird Publishing, and I'm really proud of it. It was a long time coming. I wrote it back when it was real, like I wrote it in '93. And, back then I used to write for a lot of magazines and stuff, and I continued doing that till the middle of the 2000s. But back then, a lot of my friends that had been writing for magazines and stuff were starting to get book deals and all this kind of stuff. And I go, well, geez, I should do that. And everyone was, that I knew that was a music journalist. A lot of these people were writing books about bands, like a band history, a band kind of biography type thing or musician biography. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something that was almost more fiction oriented or like a Hunter Thompson type crazy story that, reliving something that happened to you and telling it in a kind of a funny way. So I wrote this thing after the tour, and a friend of mine that had just gotten a deal writing a book about Ice-T read it and said, it's pretty good. I'll give it to my publisher. And so she did, and then I had an interview with the guy, and he was like, you're good. This is a good book, but I can't sell this. No one knows who Jeff Dahl is. No one knows who you are. This won't sell. And I was like, well, that's kind of frustrating. Well, what if we change all the names and put it out as a fiction book? Who cares? And he goes, no, I can't sell this. So I went to a couple other publishers. They all said the same thing, so I threw it in a corner and forgot about it and rolled the clock forward. My wife, who is the main announcer for our L.A. Derby Doll roller derby team, one of the girls on in her crew happened to be one of the top people at Rare Bird Publishers, and she goes, my husband has this book. It died on the vine decades ago. You want to take a look at it? And she goes, yeah, all right. And they called me and they go, we like this. This is a slice of life from the 90s, and now it's like a thing, and let's put it out. There's nothing out like this. And I'm like, okay. So there you go. It just had to ferment for a couple decades, and now it's ready to go.
Now it's ready for consumption.
Yeah.
Speaking of writing, for the folks that don't know, Bruce wrote for the LA Weekly and Billboard and Rip and Cream, Guitar World, and dozens of others, man. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, actual published publications that you would buy at a magazine stand back in the day.
Yeah, good job. Lots of work you've done. And you retired again from journalism in around, 2005?
Exactly 2005. I was just working for local papers at that time, and the pay was getting worse, and the editing was getting worse, and it just was like, what am I doing? And I just stopped doing it. And not coincidentally, about a year and a half, maybe not even that long, very much in the same time span, I got a pretty happening Pro Tools system put in my house. And I was like, well, I'd rather make records than write about them if this is the way it's going to be. So I just really switched my focus a lot more over to production and mixing and recording proper things that I could do right in my house. So
well, you know,
that was a big impetus there too.
My research found out that you have composed soundtracks for the movies Ghost World, Roadside Prophets, and Inner Dudes, on and on.
Well, I had songs in those movies. I didn't do the soundtracks, no. But, yeah, I had some songs in those films. Song in Roadside Prophets was a song I did with a band called Bug Lamp, which was fronted by Keith Morris of the Circle Jerks, who are getting ready to tour, by the way.
Yeah, I heard it was like the 40th anniversary, and Keith has been on the show a couple times.
Yeah, he's always a hoot.
Yeah, he the first interview was really, really good, and then the second time, I don't know what was going on with Keith, but I was talking with someone online recently, and I was telling them in a thread, you know, yeah, Keith has been on the show a couple times, and then all of a sudden he chimes in and he says, he puts, yeah, 2 times too many. I don't know what was his deal, man, because it was an actually good experience the first time, at least.
You know, Keith has a little bit of a codger personality, and he plays it up, I think, to some degree.
It was hilarious.
It's part of his charm.
Yeah, it was just great. A couple times too many. That was just so punk rock. I loved it, man. And you were mentioning how you were talking to the publisher, and he was saying, you know, oh, we don't know Jeff Dahl. I know Jeff Dahl. He's a friend of mine, and I'm a fan of the Jeff Dahl band. And I remember hearing like the Power Trip stuff, and I'm really intrigued by the fact that you were playing bass with the Jeff Dahl band. But what I want to narrow in on is I used to write songs for G.G. Allen, like some of his records. And I used to tour with that. Like before he even got crazy on stage, I was like touring with him, just me and him back in the early 80s. And then I found out that you guys, Jeff Dahl band, opened for G.G. at his infamous San Francisco show.
That is true. In fact, G.G. and Jeff were in touch. And we were going to be the backing band on some new stuff he was getting ready to do, and we actually met him at that show. I don't think Jeff had ever met him before that. This would have been like 90. I think it was 92, if I'm remembering correctly. Anyways, that's also I used that show as chapter 1 of the book, just to kick everything into gear, because it was fairly eventful. But we did that with the original Jeff Dahl group, which was myself, Del Hopkins, and the late Amy Wickman on guitar. Pretty good group. And that was at the Covered Wagon in San Francisco. Crazy show. I mean, I'll never forget it. And you know what? Gigi was pretty nice guy. I mean, when you were just hanging with him backstage, you wouldn't think that he was that going to be that wild of a character. But then, yeah, I mean, he did it like really methodically. He showed up with, he came in on a bus, and he had a backing band that was a local punk band, and he met them for the first time at soundcheck and ran through some songs. And then after they got through a song or two, they did a song, and then he went into sort of like a low-key version of his act and just sort of spazzed out all over the stage and everything. They kind of freaked out, and they didn't know what to do. And they stopped, and they were looking at each other, and he jumped up. He goes, no matter what happens, you guys keep playing the song. If I stop singing, or if anything you don't think is normal occurs, don't worry about it. You just play the song exactly as you learned it.
Yep.
And that was an eye opener. Then he went backstage and had like a couple double burgers or something, and downed a couple bottles of Crisco. So you can see where that's going. So it was as gross and weird as it was also fairly methodical and a weird version of show business as usual.
Trippy. I also was kind of not shocked, but I've always been obsessed with the metal artist known as Thor. And then I find out you played with Thor. What was that like?
Well, Thor is an interesting story. So Thor, I guess they were married. His wife, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but she was part of the Pantera, I think was her name. She was all dressed up in like this whole metal outfit, and she was pretty interesting. And she was the music editor of a kind of mild men's magazine from the 80s. I forget which one, We or something like that. Sure, no, it was called Cherry, Cheri.
I remember.
And she had a pretty hefty music department in that magazine. So, and she loved metal. So I was a publicist back in those days, and I would send her a bunch of stuff. She always covered it, and we got to kind of know each other, and then come to find out she's married to Thor, and they're doing a big record for Enigma, so I got hooked up to do their publicity for that album, Only the Strong, one of the classic Thor albums. And then, time rolls by. I sort of forgot about it. And then Frank, who I play with in the Cheetahs, back early 2000s when he was still in the Cheetahs, I was still in the Ads, he goes, hey, myself and Brian Kehoe being a whole other story that you can look up and find out all the myriad of bizarre things he does. We're working with Thor on some tracks. I go, Thor? Well, I dealt with him like 12 years ago or something. What's he up to? And then Thor ended up getting a deal with Smogvale Records, the label out of Cincinnati. And so he was going to kind of do his comeback record, and he wanted to make it a little bit more of like a sort of $billion Babies, Alice Cooper, hard rock kind of garagey record rather than a straight-up metal record. And Frank and I produced it and played most of the guitars and bass on it and stuff, and got some other guys to come in and do things, and then rolled forward another decade, and he got a deal with Cleopatra, and we ended up producing that, and that was a fairly big budget record for an indie rock record. And part of the things Cleopatra wanted to do with it to sort of really make a big deal of Thor, because he had his movie getting ready to come out and all that stuff that had been worked on for 10 years. Let's get a lot of guests to come on and sing or play with Thor, and it sort of show that he's the legit guy. So we got like Brian from Kix, Rick Agnew plays on it, Cheetah Chrome, Henry Rollins. It's a thing.
That's really cool. I didn't know that, man. You're educating me on that.
So that record is called Metal Avenger. It is a hoot and a half. Anybody that wants, it's out there. It's easy to find. It's pretty fun it's a pretty fun listen.
Oh, I've already.
You know what? I'll tell you this. It was the last record in which the guitar player from Motorhead plays on. Eddie Clark, Fast Eddie.
Wow, I love Fast Eddie Clark.
He does a ripping solo on it, on the title track. Pretty cool.
Metal Avenger Thor. I've written it down. I'm going to get that bad boy.
Yeah, you'll like it. It's all over the place. There's like some space rocky stuff, some metal, some kind of punky stuff.
Trippy.
A ballad, of course. You have to have your power ballad, so it's a pretty fun record.
And besides being an artist and an author, a journalist and things like that, you're also a manager. And I hear you manage Josie Cotton, who was a guest on this show not too long ago. And I'd like to ask who else you manage, if anyone else.
Well, there's a number of folks. I manage a duo called the 210s. I manage Prima Donna, pretty popular band signed to Wicked Cool. Norwood Fisher's project, Trulio Disgracius. All kinds of people. I should probably open my website and tell you everybody. It's very busy, and I've taken the last 2 weeks off as mandatory vacation, and tomorrow it's a dive back in and go haywire again. It's actually, I'll tell you, I've learned that working for yourself, you find out who the meanest boss of all is.
Hey, there you go, man. Words of wisdom.
I also work with Glitter Wizard, Radio Moscow. Those are some of my bigger bands. And Radio Moscow has a new side project called El Perro, and I'm handling them too. Well, some new stuff coming up, but I can't announce it yet.
Well, I'll hit you up sometime privately, and maybe we could work on together to get some of these acts on this show to promote a little bit, because we love to have interviews with new bands.
Oh, yeah. Well, and some are not all that new. They've been around for a while. I work with a lot of people that have been pounding it out for a long time. We go down the path together. But, yeah, I'd be thrilled with that.
Awesome, man. And,
this is a great show.
Well, thanks so much, man. We appreciate you coming on. Again, once I read your book, I'd like to do a part 2. I'm running out of time, but I'd like to ask you about the Street Walkin' Cheetahs. Of course, that band formed, I believe, in 95. Greg Shaw, Bomp Records, was like the history of Street Walkin' Cheetahs. You play guitar for Street Walkin' Cheetahs, and you have a new album coming out.
We do. It's been a long road. I actually was at Triple X Records, and I signed the Cheetahs. I was a big fan. I thought they were great, and they did their whole thing through the '90s and everything, and into the 2000s, and like a lot of bands, threw in the towel at a certain point. And I've played off and on with Frank since about 2004. We had a band called Sweet Justice, and then we had a kind of an arena rock club band called Angus Khan. And then he put the Cheetahs back together, and I was drafted in to play guitar. So I'm not an original member. I joined in whenever we got back together. It must be about 6 years ago now. And we did a single, and have been playing around, and all the usual stuff. And we really got kind of serious last year about cranking out new material and seeing what we could do with it. So we went into the wonderful Kitten Robot studio and recorded 6 songs. And got a couple record deals with it. So we got a deal here in the States and a deal over in Spain. So now we're going in to do quite a few more songs to fill out both records. So there'll be some crossover between the two of them, but there'll be a lot of songs that are only on one or the other. And we have a single coming out to kind of kick this whole adventure into gear, and that's going to be out in about 5 weeks.
Now, is that the one that you emailed me?
That's correct. That's going to be the digital release, and then the 45 will be coming out hopefully around the same time. We want to have it out on Valentine's Day, and then hopefully the B-side, which is not suitable for airplay, will be available to everybody too, as it's on the 45.
Well, that's great that it was recorded by the legendary Paul Rossler at Kitten Robot. I've recorded there many times. It's a great, fantastic studio. And Paul, man.
Who do you record there with? What band is yours?
Divine Dirt.
Okay.
And actually, Rick Agnew produced the album before last, and then Paul produced the last one before this. Yeah, so we kind of know a lot of the same people.
You're in good hands. Paul was sort of tutored by Gaza X, and I used to record with him a lot.
Another guy that's a friend of mine that's been on this show too. There, Bruce.
Gaza's hilarious. He's great. When Gaza moved on to a different situation, and Josie still had a studio, so Paul took it over, and they set up shop a lot closer to where I live, which was nice. So it's kind of been my home for everything. It's where when I work with Prima Donna or the 210s or Cheetahs or anybody I might be recording. I just recorded a duo from Arizona called Beatnik Party. I take them there, and we do all the basics there and finish up at my house where I have pretty good little vocal session place and can mix and all that sort of stuff.
Utilize those Pro Tools. Well, we are running out of time, but we are going to go ahead and play something from the brand new Street Walkin' Cheetahs release. The song is called We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For. Sister Tracy's going to give some word about our underwriters before we play the song, but I wanted to say thanks again to the legendary Bruce Duff for taking the time to make an appearance on the Church of Rock, and let's do it again after I get a chance to absorb your book.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bruce.
Yeah, so I would be happy to do that. It sounds fun.
Okay, well, thanks so much, man, and keep rocking, my friend, and here's to your health, man.
Thank you.
Cheers. And
have a happy 2020 for everybody.
That's right. Let's make it a happy one, right, Sister Tracy?
Same to you, Bruce. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, great.
Take care, brother.